And welcome back to the Scarlet to the Land podcast. I'm your host, Cody Croy, of course, joined by Big Jake. How you doing?
Good. How you doing today?
Doing well. Got a lot to get into today as the Browns, they've started training camp. Training camp is officially underway. We've got some rumors to discuss. Tony Rizzo from ESPN Cleveland recently dropped some insider knowledge that he supposedly has that Shedeur Sanders could be on the trade block. Daryl Ryder for 92.3 later added his own opinion and said that he thinks that Shedeur could also be traded. Just your thoughts on that as we start this episode.
I mean, for me, I think it's just another desperate attempt for guys like Rizzo to throw crazy stories to the wall and hope that they stick. Trading him makes absolutely zero sense, like,
Hmm.
especially right now in the midst of this QB battle. And as we heard, moving out of mandatory camp there, it sounded like a lot of people around Berea were saying that Shador looked better than Deshaun. It sounded like he really
Hmm.
started to gain some traction. And now you got Monken. Monken did say, before that he wanted to name, a starter going into actual training camp in July, but now he's saying he's not going to do that. The way I look at it, like, what if we do trade Shador? You're going to have Gabriel or Green backing up Deshaun. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Right. We've heard from Mary Kay and other Browns reporters. It seems like there's a lot of different opinions on who's looking the best, who's looking uh, better among the two, and then you have Dylan Gabriel, who's kind of, you know, in his own little spot there. But to me, without even seeing some of the film, without seeing some of the clips from practice, I really don't know who has the leg up because we hear something new all the time. But looking at these rumors, and you mentioned it, Rizzo, he's kind of a bit unreliable.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
it sounds like, and he's had his own opinion on Shedeur for a long time now. And so you don't know how much of that is fact and how much of that is fiction. But looking at Shedeur, we're going to operate like he is the starting quarterback for the Browns. If Shedeur comes out and starts week 1 and beyond, what are the expectations for him going into this season? And what pressure do you think he has on his shoulders?
So that's a good question. I feel like he has the weight of the world on his shoulders. It's been that way since he was at Jackson State. Dion's his father. Dion is arguably the greatest, secondary guy to ever play the game.
Mhm.
He wasn't necessarily blessed with those athletic traits that Dion had. So, but no, I think, going into this season, if we are going to talk like he is going to be the starter, which I'm still not sold on all
Sure, sure.
Deshaun's going to be the starter stuff. I don't buy it because another thing that I've been seeing is, Shador's been at Colorado. He's been working. He's been posting
Right.
those stories. You got Deshaun Watson, posting stories with his wife dancing around in Versace. So one guy's working extremely hard and the other really isn't.
Mhm.
So for me, the expectations say he is the starter this year. You want to see a huge step up in play. Like last year, I knew that he was going to have some early onset struggles. I mean, every
Sure.
rookie quarterback does. But look at how bad this team was when he came in starting. I mean, arguably the worst offensive line and wide receiver group in the NFL. Andrew Berry finally went into an offseason and really invested on the offensive side of the ball, specifically at offensive line and wide receiver. And of course, he landed a complete star in Harold Fannin last year. So expectation wise, I mean, you got to come out and I would say if he is starting, he has to find a way to limit the turnovers, anywhere between 15 and below. And if he is throwing at least 15, you need to have 25 touchdowns to go along with it.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
know,
And that's really what I want to talk about is it's the turnover from last year. You have a new head coach, you have a new defensive coordinator, you have a new offensive coordinator. You got rid of your tight end one, and you're bringing in a new tight end who's extremely talented from last year's roster. You have two new receivers. You have a brand new offensive line, and you're getting Quinshon Judkins back, who spent the last portion of the season injured. just looking at this roster, is it valid to continue making excuses for sure? Obviously, it's kind of different to have a fifth round pick coming coming in and starting 2 years in a row, but is it valid to continue making excuses for sure with this new team and all the differences that we have made?
No, we cannot continue to make any kind of excuse. Like if he were to come in and perform like he
Sure.
did last year,
Yes.
I
Yes.
mean, we're moving into, we'll get into this in a little bit. I mean, this 2027 QB class, this is one of my favorite QB classes we've had in the last decade, probably even longer than that. I see at least 6 to 7 QBs at the minimum, I think, are going in the first round, as long as these guys end up coming out and. But
Sure.
no,
Yeah.
like he has to take a big step forward, and I think he understands that if he does get his opportunity to start this year. I mean, you have a much better offensive line, and one guy that's really came out in camp and has balled, according to everything I've read, is Isaiah Bond. He actually looked like a legitimate wideout, and that's huge with a guy like Denzel Boston, what he's doing. I'm not going to harp on Casey. I had my concerns. I would have actually drafted Denzel above him,
Sure.
but I'm not worried about Casey. I think a lot of his drop issues were him just he tries to make plays before he actually catches the ball, and that's something he needs to learn, but that's very fixable.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's not something that proves that you have bad hands. Like he just needs to really get that focus down and see the ball into his hands. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you have to come out and perform this year, and if he doesn't, we have our answer. And I'm a Shedeur guy, and I'm ready to admit that if he doesn't come out and take a huge leap forward, we really have to dive into this 2027 class and find our franchise guy.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think that there's plenty of talent on this team. I mentioned before the coaching staff is also brand new, but you guys like Denzel Boston, who I agree with you. I was actually higher on him than I was Concepcion, but certainly not a bad pick there. Um, but there's weapons on this team, and I think the coaching staff is plenty good enough to get the quarterback to the where we need him to be, and we have a pretty favorable schedule uh, ahead of us. So going into year two with these quarterbacks that are expected, we'll see the quarterbacks that are expected to come into this next draft class if they perform well. There's a ton of pressure on Shedeur Sanders, and I think that if he wants to secure his spot, he's going to have to perform.
Yeah, yeah, I couldn't agree anymore. Like I said, I'm a Shador guy, but this is the year that if you do get that opportunity to start with the improvements that we made. Last year when I looked at that team, I didn't have any hope for Shador last year to like really come out and ball. But that is why, that um when it came to him with some of these games he did have, when you talk about the Titans or some of the throws he made against the Raiders, those things stuck out to me. And that's something that, that's why I feel the way that I do about Shador. And that's why I want him to play this year because the best thing for us is for him to prove he's a franchise quarterback.
Absolutely, and I mean, looking in training camp, um, it seems like he has fixed some of those problems. I think the biggest thing for Shedeur is he needs to get the ball out quicker. His issue was oftentimes he held on to the ball, and that would lead to turnovers. Could definitely be a little bit more accurate, and he could use his legs a bit more. So there's a ton that he could do to improve, and he's going to have to do that. But if he does not, there's like we expect, there's a ton of available options. Who are some of your guys in this next draft class that you think, if it came down to it, could be the next guy for the Browns? Also, we need to mention Brendan Sorsby. He will not be in the supplemental drafts. He will have to wait and declare for the NFL draft. So he will lose that opportunity as well.
Yeah, and just talking about Swordsby, I kind of expected this. The NFL and all these pro leagues are really cracking down. The only issue that I do have with it is it does seem like they do take things like gambling a lot more serious and say guys that beat up on their girls
Yeah,
or
domestic violence and
domestic
yeah,
violence and sexual assaults, which that's
right.
a whole different story. But I do think they made the right decision there. I
Yes,
do think this is their way of suspending him the entire year, and then I believe he can still put his name in that
he
2027
can.
class.
Yes.
So I like Sorsby. I think he's a good player, but there's a lot of QBs this year that I like a lot more than him. And I'll just start it off with my QB1 as of right now, and that is Dante Moore.
Uh-huh.
6'3", about 210, 215. He's not like an explosive athlete, but if I had to estimate what I think he would run, it's probably in that 4.6, like 4.65 range. I just love how calm he is really in the pocket. He showed a little bit, in the playoffs. He got a little rattled, but that's
Mhm.
understandable. Indiana was a fantastic team, so I'm not gonna beat him up too much. He never looked rushed in his processing. He makes nice reads. He can move off that first target and find another guy even on his third. So, the anticipation with him is outstanding, and his accuracy is a huge reason on why he is my QB1 rather than somebody like Archman.
Yeah, and I'm gonna agree with you there. I think with Arch Manning, we haven't seen enough, and a lot of the hype is, of course, his name. Obviously, his dad was a up and coming prospect before he had that illness, and then his uncles, Eli and Peyton, of
Who are those
course,
guys?
obviously two future Hall of Famers and a couple of Super Bowl champions right there. And then his grandfather, Arch Manning, or Archie Manning, also played in the NFL. So, of course, the talk is going to be around Arch Manning. He has a long way to go, in my opinion. I think that he's a guy that he's shown flashes, but he just hasn't put it together. So that's why I'm saying my QB1 is definitely going to be Dante Moore. I think, like you mentioned, the accuracy is there. Uh, of course, he's a solid athlete, and I think that I would put him as my QB1. You
Yes,
uh you mentioned another guy off camera that I'm not even familiar with, but he's kind of your guy, your dark horse candidate. I'm gonna get to my dark horse candidate first, but then we'll talk about this guy. But I want to go with Julian Sand. Obviously, he's a Buckeye, and it's not just because he's a Buckeye. With Dante Moore, we mentioned accuracy. Well, Julian Sand was one of the most accurate passers in college football history. Um, Obviously, size is a concern there, but if there's any guy that I do believe in to have that success at the NFL level, it's Julian Sand.
yeah, like, and I'm still a big believer in CJ Stroud. He knows that last year was unacceptable for him, and I still think when it comes to the smoothest passer I have ever seen in college football, it was CJ Stroud.
Mhm.
And it's funny that you mentioned Julian because I think he's probably the second smoothest passer of the ball that I've ever seen in college football outside of CJ Stroud. The mechanics just are extremely clean. His anticipation is elite. He definitely processes defenses extremely quick, but when that pressure does arrive, that's when he can kind of get away from doing what he does best, which is diagnosing those coverages. And that's something that I need to see him improve on. He is in my about top 6 range of QBs,
Mhm.
and I have a lot of faith in him. I do think we're going to see a big leap. He, like you said, his size is a little bit of a concern, but he's a much better athlete, than that. He hasn't really shown that part of his game
Mhm.
yet.
Right, right.
So I just think when you're moving into the NFL, when you make that transition, you have to be, you have to be able to process defenses very quick, which I believe he does. We're going to have to see him get better under pressure, which I think he will this year. And you just need to be a clean passer, and that's what he does best.
Ryan Day mentioned it. We have not seen it all from Julian Sand as far as using his legs and showing that athleticism. And Ryan Day said that he needs to do that. And we don't hear that out of Ryan Day. That's very rare. So I think that you will see that this season put on display, and we'll see how that goes as he prepares for the NFL draft. But I do want to get to your guy, your dark horse quarterback that you did mention to me.
So this guy is actually my QB3 in the entire class. I do have Arch 2. If we talk about Arch, which I'm sure we will, I'll get into those reasons on why and the leap I expect him to take. But the guy that is my QB3 is CJ Bailey out of NC State. This kid, I've seen it 6'7", but a lot of the lists I'm seeing, he's at 6'6". He needs to beef up a little bit. They have him around 215 pounds. He does have a lighter frame, but he's a fantastic athlete. If I had to estimate, There was no official listing of his 40 time, but I would have to assume from tape I've watched, he's in that 4.5 range.
Mhm.
I think he has by far the highest upside out of any QB in this class. I will be watching NC State probably weekly because, we're Browns fans. We have to definitely always look forward to who's our next possible franchise quarterback. And, the size, his arm, he has an absolute cannon. Very good athlete, as I just said. And, he attacks tight windows and he plays with a lot of confidence. And obviously, that's what you need in the NFL. If there's one thing that I have seen on tape that I would like to see him improve, I do think, I don't even know if it's necessarily that he's not processing quick enough. He just seems to second guess himself sometimes in tight windows. Like he can make every throw that you could imagine. But just sometimes it looks like he needs to be a little bit more disciplined and have more belief in himself. And if he does do that this year, he's going to be my QB 100% coming out.
Like I said, I'm not too familiar on him. Um, a guy that you just mentioned it recently, but a guy that we're both familiar with is Arch Manning. We need to dive more into him. Your thoughts on Arch Manning?
We all know the Manning family, some of the best to ever do it as a collective group in the NFL. A kid's 6'4", about 225. I actually heard that he might be pushing more 230 now, which that would actually
Okay,
be huge if that's true.
yeah.
But I think he is arguably the most gifted quarterback, in this class. The arm talent is there. It's obvious. The issue is the feet. I have a
Mhm.
lot. That's what I need to see this year. That's why, he has every arm angle you want that ball to come from. But a lot of the time, he doesn't need to be putting that ball side arming it. And a lot of it's just because, his feet are so gapped apart. I just need to see more consistency with his feet throwing the ball, which I would probably assume with Uncle Eli and Peyton Manning, they really probably worked with him this offseason on that. And just, I would like to see more consistency reading the full field, going through his progressions. We all know, I think he is an outstanding athlete. Everybody knows he's a good athlete. I actually think he's a great athlete.
Mhm.
So I think that's really what is setting him apart as my QB2 right now, because I do believe in him as a passer. It's just something he really needs to show me this year, or he'll fall further down my board.
Absolutely. Well, we hope it doesn't come down to it. But if Shedeur is traded, you're looking and I know that I'm gonna trigger you with these words, but you're looking at a certain person starting at the QB1 spot. What do you make of that? And we'll get to this and then we'll wrap up. But what do you make of that, and what implications does that serve if Deshaun Watson does land the starting spot in a situation where Shedeur is no longer on this team?
So I just put it pretty simply. I mean, I'm so just full fetched on this, on why I feel the way that I do. I mean, the guy will be 31 years old,
Mhm.
not even week 2 of the NFL season. If anybody can show me a single quarterback that has performed poorly for 5 years, suffered 2 torn Achilles as a guy that uses his legs a lot to even be successful, and a major throwing shoulder surgery, and just came back like nothing ever happened. This organization has literally nothing to actually gain by starting Deshaun. And, like, say he comes back and plays average football and we go 7-10. Then
Mhm.
what? He's not your long term future. You're not winning a Super Bowl this year. What are you going to extend him again to go? Oh, maybe we can go 9-8 next year. But if you look at the other side of it with Shedeur, if he proves that he's the franchise quarterback, you just solved the hardest position in all of sports. If
Mhm.
he struggles, then you got your answer, before you're heading into what I believe is one of the most talented QB classes we've seen in decades.
Right.
And Don, like we talked about Dante Moore, you have Arch Manning, you have CJ Bailey, which is my guy. Darian Mensa is somebody we didn't
Yes.
talk about. CJ Carr, Lenora Sellers, and Lenora Sellers is another one. He has everything you want
All the
from a
tools.
tool standpoint,
All the
but
tools, but he needs to put it together. Yes.
he needs to put it together. But hey, they got Nick Harbor back this year. South Carolina's a fun one. I mean,
Mhm.
they got Dylan Stewart on the edge. Jeremiah Smith, he's my number one prospect, then Leonard Moore, and then Dylan Stewart. So I think they're in a really good position to actually make a little run at that if Lenore Sellers proves that he can be that guy.
Sure.
So it's just an easy decision for me. There is nothing to gain from. I like the people that I talk to about this. they all are talk like when they're like, oh, like you're just a Shedeur fan, you're not a Browns fan. That has nothing to do with anything. I'm a
Mhm.
diehard Browns fan, and I feel like every diehard Browns fan should never want to see this guy play football in Cleveland again. It's
Absolutely.
crazy.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Um, Looking at the Browns quarterback situation, what do you think is the most likely outcome? I mean, you have Taylor Green, you have Dylan Gabriel, Deshaun, and you have Shedeur Sanders. One of these guys is going to have to go. If so, I'll start off with my opinion. I think um, either you trade Dylan Gabriel or Taylor Green could go to the practice squad.
So I do not think Green is going to go to the practice squad just because I believe he can help this offense this year. I
Sure,
truly believe that. I think wildcat formations, quarterback, tush push, 6'6", extreme athlete. And I mean, even if you go out there and you put him in shotgun and give him a little RPO to where he can pass the ball, that's why I don't see him going to the practice squad. I would assume that Gabriel would be the odd guy out.
sure.
Which, and again, when it comes to Riz, exploding these rumors about trading Shedeur, that makes no sense to me because it's like, who's a QB that they could go after right now?
Right.
Sitting in free agency, I don't have anybody that rings any bells for me right now. So you get rid of
Yeah.
Shedeur, what Dylan Gabriel's your backup? Come on, come on.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes no sense to me, but it's what's being reported. That's going to about wrap it up. Want to thank you guys for listening to the Scarlet to the Land podcast on this Browns episode. Go Browns.
Go Browns.